I'm Liz Larson.
And I'm Bill McKenna.
And together, we created the Cogno Movement System. And we'd like to welcome you to the New Life Perspectives radio show,
where we're going to be sharing with you tools, tips, and ideas that are going to change your life.
Hello, hello, in UK Health Radio Land. I'm Liz Larson, and I'm here with my friend,
Bill McKenna.
Hey, Bill McKenna. And we're the team that created the Cogno Movement Systems, and we just happen to be the host of the New Life Perspectives radio show here on the UK Health Radio Network. And today, we want to share with you something that's on our mind. We've said before that Bill and I are talking in the background all the time. And it's been fun to kind of let you guys in on some of these conversations. And this one is about your imagination or your ability to manifest. So they're really one and the same thing. You can only, Bill always says, think as great as you feel, but you can also only imagine, ready for this, as freely as the significance of your traumas. You can only imagine as freely as the significance of your traumas, which means that your dreams are limited to how active your past experiences are in your mind and body right now. Shabam. There it is, Bill McKenna. What do you think about that?
You know, this is something that we see play out on a daily basis because we're working with people to help them through the process of their lives to enhance whatever is happening in their lives because they would want more love, more joy. They want the nicer house. We have clients that want their own private jet. And they're on path to get that. Now, how did that happen? How did they go from no jet to getting a jet? You know, and this process is, you know, you might think the nuts and bolts of I'm going to create a product and we're going to sell X amount of, you know, widgets and that sort of thing. But really, you know, I'm using this example of the jet because what it is that kept the person from manifesting it wasn't really the nuts and bolts, right? It was showing up that way, you know, like limitations in the business. But once there were things that were traumatic in their lives, were basically no longer hold that value for them, right? It's just like, oh, that happened. And actually, they can't even remember it. There's no charge on it. When that happens, then it opens the door for more possibilities and what they can think of and what they can create. All of a sudden, unlimited opportunities.
Well, yeah, actually, but we're talking about even before that, right? Have you ever heard this saying, you know, dream big? But when your focus, and really it's your body's focus, and we'll get into that later, is on all these things that happen to your life, all your reasons, all the things that hold you down, you can't even think of a private jet. Like that wouldn't even be in the realm of possibility. So really what we're talking about, like a person could see a jet and be like, oh, that would be nice. That's one thing. They're not really thinking about how it would be in their lives. They're not really trying it on, right? When you're in the realm of making something really happen, there is this sensation like, oh, well, that jet is probably real close to the one I'll have, right? Oh, I like that one even better. You know, I think I'll consider that one as a part of my future. You see the difference? Like one is, man, that would be great, but it's not part of me. And the other is, oh, actually, yes, I'll be choosing these features. So when you're getting close to manifesting, you're closer to that side of, let me look at the features. And you're really in that place of dreaming big as though that's actually part of your life. But the person who's like, meh, that can't happen to me. That must be nice. Those jerks who can afford a private jet, that person's in a completely different space. They are nowhere close to having that in their life. And it'll probably never happen in their life because it's not about them. It doesn't have anything to do with them. It doesn't concern them, right? So it's a big difference, right? When we're talking about manifesting. It's
huge. It's huge. And, we're talking about something, let's face it, ridiculous. Your own private jet, right? It's ridiculous. But the same principle for the mundane, who just wants to have a person in their life that loves and respects them, that listens to them, that can hear them, that they are happy with to go home and see every night. Something as simple as that, right? Which, is pretty much every person in the world, right? Wants some version of a bond with someone. The details vary, but it's the feeling of hey, closeness, that sort of thing. And for some of us, that it's just a lifetime of, boom bust on these things, right? Or it's just not available to me. And these things, as Liz was saying, you know what? You don't really realize it, but it's really the trauma that sits in the background, which creates kind of a disturbance in your nervous system.
Yeah, a disturbance is a good word. I like almost the word distraction. Your mind body, and when we talk about the brain or the mind, Bill and I are really talking about, when we're talking about the mind, we're really talking about the brain and the body together and how they respond and talk to themselves. And so the mind, when it is distracted by all the things that happened in your life previously that seem to be negative or limiting, you don't have any mind power left to really consider the big things or dream big. So you said something that's interesting. You said, private jet's ridiculous, except for that it's not. For a lot of people, if you ever flown into a big airport, they're lined up out there. In a lot of people's lives, that's just an everyday thing. That's just what we do.
That's just how that is what's appropriate and feels correct to them. Now Liz said something really super important there. And I want to kind of bring this home for everybody is, you might to yourself be thinking, I'm not really thinking about the fact that I was beat up when I was a kid,
no.
but here's what's going on. Your nervous system remembers, and maybe you've had yourself walking around in a malaise, maybe walking around and feeling defeated, feeling depressed, feeling repressed, feeling like there's no possibility for you of a better existence. Well, it's just a feeling, right? No, I don't ruminate on what happened to me before and that sort of thing, but your body's remembering and you have a feeling which is less than joy, happiness, bliss, excitement, an excitement for life, a love, a zest for life, feeling adorable, feeling attractive.
Yeah.
You walk through your day and like, people are smiling at me. Why they? Oh my, of course I know why you're smiling, because you like me. You can feel me. You feel that good, positive energy, right?
Yeah. I have a really good example of this. There's something really interesting we do in Cognitive Movement. If you guys have been with us for a while, you may have heard some of our birth stories. So what happens is a mom will come to us and She's either usually getting ready to give birth. This happens oftentimes in the third trimester, this session, where what we do is we'll clear out the fears, the traumas, that kind of stuff. And then we map in, just like an athlete, how the mom wants to birth to go. Okay, so when she gets there, we talk about all the things, what's going to happen after the birth, what happened in the last birth, or if there wasn't one, what they know about birth. And then there's the middle section where it's actually the birth itself. And we talk about these things and we see where the system lights up. Well, what's interesting is most of these women have no idea what they would want the birth to be like. They can't imagine it. It doesn't have anything to do with them. And they've got all the stories that they've just heard throughout all millennium of time about how terrible birth is. Following me?
Yeah.
So when we go to have them decide exactly how they want their birth to go, there's such a wide gap, such a big disconnect because they can't even imagine it, which is how we started this conversation. They don't have a placeholder for that kind of information. Oh, I get to decide what happens first and what happens next. A big part of that is they don't even know what happens during birth. You'd think women do. You kind of do until you start to break it down piece by piece, right? So even this very natural thing that happens to 50% of the planet is so far out of reach, so far out of availability, based on not even traumas that have happened to them necessarily, but traumas that have happened to their mom, their aunt, their sister, someone they saw on TV, something they heard about in the Bible, right? So all of those stories, lack of information is one, that happens. What will limit our imagination? But more than often, what limits our imagination is all of these past things. Now, in this case, it's not even their past really, except for what they've heard or what they think they know. In the case where it's something that actually happened to you, that thing is like a dog leash, like a tether that limits how far into imagination, how big you can see or dream, what you can actually visualize in your own life.
Isn't that interesting? Because it's so rooted in the physical body as a physical experience that is quite intense, right? Right. So having that rooted in the body like that makes all the sense in the world that, this is real, this is reality. So thinking outside of an actual experience is quite the stretch if you're trying to do it with your mind. But imagine for a second that you no longer felt that way. You just simply didn't feel that way anymore. What opens up?
Well, that's what happens at the end of one of these sessions or during. By the end of the session, the woman's whole body, mind, higher self has actually experienced this upcoming birth. But before we get there, all of the things that are running in their mind-body complex about it have to be cleared out. It's almost like throwing out the trash, right? Stuff that really actually doesn't apply to the woman, like the mother's birth story, like her mother's life. It really, in reality, doesn't have anything to do with the birth that's upcoming, except for that the physical body thinks it does. So it'll ratchet back what she believes can happen for herself. At the end of the session, when all the trash is thrown out, all of a sudden, there's this absolute reality of how she decides her birth is going to be. She's experienced it. Her whole nervous system has experienced the birth from top to bottom, bottom to top, again and again. And now the birth that she decides on is absolutely possible. In fact, it's inevitable. And we see it again and again in the outcomes. We've had moms birth in or map in births that were an hour and 4 minutes, 30 minutes, or some moms who was a first baby and they wanted it to be like 8 hours from the first labor pain to the end so they could take a bath. One of them had like a swing that she wanted to swing in for a while. For her, it was important to kind of savor the moment, but it happened exactly like she wanted it to. And before the session, that was absolutely impossible. The idea would be so foreign, so strange, so out there that they wouldn't even really accept it, except for they sort of wanted it. During that session of throwing out the trash, now it becomes absolutely available, inevitable, how it's going to go down. And each of us can have that for ourselves, whether it's a birth story or a private jet, as long as we learn how to recognize the trash. So let's take our first break. And when we come back, let's talk about the trash bill, McKenna. Let's talk about, are our traumas trash? Because some people might just want to punch me right in the mouth for that. Or do they have value? And if they have value, what is it? So let's take a break. We'll hear from the good folks at the UK Health Radio Network.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Okay, so we ended that last segment talking about how useful is trauma in creating our lives, in creating the life we want. Let me clarify, because literally we're manifesting every day of every year, every minute, really, because we get to decide how our life turns out with our actions, right? So everybody's manifesting. But we're talking about your ability to dream big, and how far does your imagination let you dream if you've got all this trash? So are traumas trash, or do they have value?
Gosh, from our physical body's perspective, from our nervous system's perspective, they certainly seem to have tremendous value. And the reason that it's valued so highly is because, hey, don't let that happen again. Hey, there's a problem here. Look out, right? Ironically, this is the exact same thing that ends up causing more trauma. We talked about this on one of the other episodes, and it was related to how a criminal, a violent criminal, will choose its victim. I think it was the Boston Strangler. I was discussing with a friend about the gait, meaning how somebody walks. Well, guess how the Boston Strangler chose his victims? It was because of their gait. He knew from watching them walk which ones had already been traumatized. And it's very interesting once you start to look at things very sensitively. Liz Larson, the famous philosopher, she had taught me about watching the gait and utilization of that during a cognitive movement session so that you could know when has a person actually gotten done with their trauma. It will be reflected in their walk, where they're now walking with their shoulders level, the gait, heel toe. They're walking confident. The spine is erect. The head's on straight, not tilted over to the side. All these little indicators of how a person, absent their traumas, their body's reflected in it. Point is that, when we started this portion of the episode, Is it a value? Well, kind of, mostly not. If you extract your lesson, the conscious lesson from things, then, you get what you can there. But holding on to any trauma or keeping it stuck in the body unprocessed literally will create other either A, limiting, or B, truly negative impacts in your life. Ever wonder why, everybody's got one of these, right? You sit down in a restaurant, right? You're there with a group of friends and everybody's ordering their meal. And there's somebody there. You've gone out. Everybody knows this person. You go out to dinner with this person, and repeatedly, the order always shows up wrong for that person.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Is that true? I mean, everybody's gotten their order, and that one person, somehow, it doesn't show up. Or it's wrong. Or this waiter spills water on them. Something done happened. Guess what? It is a literal attractor pattern that's in their lives.
Yeah. You know what it really is, Bill? It becomes the rudder. Our traumas become our rudder. You and I are both pilots. We know about the rudder, right?
Yeah.
Left or right. But it makes the decision from behind us. Same with the rudder on a boat. It makes your decision from behind the boat, and the back end of the plane or the boat decides for the front end of the plane or the boat. And that is what happens with trauma. So having a rudder in a plane is a great thing, and a rudder on a boat is a great thing for direction, right? But if that rudder started to have a mind of its own and it decided which direction you were going, you'd end up in a mountain real fast. The same with the boat. Trauma kind of does that for us. It has a way of directing our lives. So for an example, I know someone who's really high functioning and successful in some areas of their life. But their life, the rudder in their life is the trauma they experienced, the way their parents behaved and the people around them. Traumatic, no doubt about it. So on the surface, they're like, hey, I'm doing so much better than them, so I'm good. But you can actually see the tether on them to these traumas. They can't get out of it. For one, they can't have a relationship because in the past, the relationships were absolute train wrecks, trash, right? They can't, their attitudes are so severe about certain things that it really pushes away opportunity, right? So their rudder is stuck and it is aiming them in a direction that will eventually end in a lot of disappointment, if not a crash into the mountain. So our traumas, our experiences, in cognitive movement, we kind of don't even use the word trauma as much anymore. We use the word experience because that's all it is. You get to decide whether it was a trauma or a triumph, right? I knew someone once who kind of lived on a mountain. They were real poor, with that grandpa that had like one tooth and the overalls on and right. And they saw their life as a complete triumph because this grandparent was like amazing to them. And they loved it that they got to run around free with no shoes on, right? To them, it was a triumph. To somebody else, who are like, well, I can't become a millionaire because I lived on a hill with my grandpa in overalls, and spitting into the spittoon, right? So it's an experience. Your nervous system kind of decides whether it's a triumph or a trauma and how it guides your plane. So when we started this conversation, we're saying that your imagination really is as limited as your attention on those traumas, whether they're triumphs or traumas, right? They will anchor you into a very specific position on life. And they'll keep you from actually even being able to see any possibility, right? So the value of them is that sometimes you learn something and you do better. The trash part is where that's all you focus on is I can't because. Am I right about this or wrong? What do you think, Bill McKenna?
I think you're absolutely right. And this is actually something that in actually quantum physics, that it's very much true. There is an interesting fact, and that is that our minds are not only a receiver, but a creator of reality. And at the quantum level, what happens is we actually collapse reality from a wave into a particle. This is the scientific research that's been done since the 1930s and 40s. They were able to figure out in the quantum field that, which is underlying our reality, is that the observer of a reality will collapse reality into, basically they call it from a wave to a particle, specific reality. In the quantum field, what happens is they have something called a quantum supersupposition of states, where everything can be in both. It can both be happening and not happening all at the same time. And whatever we think and believe as is true, what happens is it becomes that. So our trauma, our set point actually will affect reality.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely it does. It affects our reality and our attention on it, our body's attention on it determines how much it affects our reality, right?
Exactly. So, things that we've known forever, such as Ford, I think, said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
They knew this way back in the day, but they didn't have the science at the quantum level to actually really determine it and see, oh, yeah, it is in fact real. And here's the interesting thing, is these quantum research projects, as we talked about in another episode, are so amazing because when they set up two observers of the exact same event, when one person looked, there was a verifiable outcome of A, and the exact same experiment, but this other observer, and they saw outcome B. Both were true. So it really is the case. Our position, our feeling, creates reality. And it's kind of mind-blowing. I know it's mind-blowing it was for me, that there is no objective reality. There's only a subjective reality. That is, even today, I struggle with that, but I know it's true, and I've seen it happen, especially, right in our own lives, for ourselves and for others.
Yeah, there's an old saying that there's three perspectives to everything that happens: yours, the other person, and the observer, or your opinion, my opinion, and the truth. And the truth is like some version of the combination of things. You can only see things from the perspective from which you are. So there's this old story of a cop questioning people at a four-corner stop, and where they're questioning them about the accident that they just saw. And let's say you've got 20 people, 5 on each corner, and you question 20 people on each corner, and you're going to get 20 different realities about what happened. Even the two that are standing next to each other have a slightly different perspective from where they were standing. And the truth becomes some version of all of that put together. But the thing that's the most fascinating to me is the truth is also none of those. Absolutely none of those perspectives, and the collective of them are not actually the truth either. But you can only function from the one that you see.
So what Liz, what you're saying is that absent your negative experience, absent the negative feeling, right? Like I say, you don't even know what it is, right? From way back in the day. I had no idea, by the way. I'd give myself as an example. I had no idea that I had a trauma. I went up. You ever heard of St. Joseph's aspirins? St. Joseph's aspirins were my dad, when he fed them to me, I was 4 years old. He said, take your candy medicine. I was like, candy? I'm all about the candy when I'm 4 years old. Heck yeah. So, I take the candy medicine. Well, I get up in the morning, it was up on the shelf, and, bad boy Billy goes up and takes and I'm just eating candy in the morning, and being a greedy little bad boy that I was, I only shared one with each sister. But, there I am taking the whole thing. And all these aspirin, right? I ate the whole bottle. And my sisters were just so mad at me for not sharing. They were like, when mom and dad get up, it's like, bad boy Billy didn't share, and so off to the hospital I go, and they stick those tubes right up my nose, down to your stomach. I had all these people holding me down to pump my stomach. And anyway, I didn't even know that was really kind of a trauma for me until, my mom was saying, oh yeah, you went to the hospital and they put you in a cage afterwards. I remembered then I was like screaming bloody murder. I could still remember the cage above my head and like, don't, I'll never do it again. And the whole thing of tubes in my nose and it was I could still remember what it felt like to have those tubes stuck down, your nose, down your throat. You can't breathe, and woo. Anyway, point is it sits there in your body.
Bill wasn't in a torture chamber. Those of you who are younger wouldn't know this, but when children went in the hospital at that young, they would put them in basically a large style crib.
Yes.
That did have a top on it. They didn't want the child climbing out. And from a child's perspective, it really was a cage, but it wasn't like a cage in a dungeon somewhere. I know because my brother had the same experience. When he was 2, he had bronchial asthma, and he would talk about being in a cage. Nobody could figure out what he was talking about. And That's what it was. That's what they look like. So it's interesting that you say that, Bill, because your body remembers an experience without the information about why and records it as a trauma. I know my brother's body certainly recorded it as that. And then, my parents did this to me. They put me in this cage. They took me to this place to let them torture me. And now this is where the body will start to record resentments, trauma against the parents for doing exactly what they had to do to save your life. My brother, same situation. He had to go to save his life. But from his little perspective, without any greater knowledge, it recorded, these are not good people. I'm not really safe with them.
Yeah. You're like screaming for your life, like, don't do this to me. I'll be a good boy now, and like, no, and then you're like, whoa, that's you're not safe. Not safe.
And the body remembers it as a punishment, and it isn't,
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I'll share another story about how the memory of the body will get it wrong and how it can really change a life. So for right now, let's hear from the good folks at the UK Health Radio Network. UK Health, take it away.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
So we're talking about that your imagination is limited to how focused your body is on the trauma in your life. You can't even think past some of these limitations. We were talking about, being able to imagine a private jet in your life. I'm in that place of imagining myself on the private jet. That's one of those things that I just think would solve so many of my issues. I mean, I really think. So I promised a story. When I was in school, there was this guy, NLP school. There was this guy who 100% believed that his dad was a terrible person who wanted to murder him. He was an awful, awful, awful parent. No one in the family saw it that way but him. And no one really knew why. Well, the story goes, they went to the Grand Canyon. He was about 3 years old. And they walk up to the edge of the Grand Canyon, and it's terrifying. Like, the Grand Canyon is terrifying. It feels as though it's going to suck you in, right? Have you been there before, Bill?
I have been there before. I didn't go up to the rim. I was down in the river.
Yeah. I mean, at the edge, it's really magnificent and awe-inspiring, but it's very terrifying. So he's there and he has this experience. And I would imagine that everybody's probably holding him back and be careful. And, we're going to walk up to the edge. Does someone have hold of the baby? All the things that happen. And a little body hears all these things and knows, okay, there's danger coming, right? They're used to it. Don't walk out in the street. Don't run in front of the cars, that kind of stuff. So they went back to the campground, which is a long ways away from the edge. And his dad was playing with him by hanging him from his feet. You know how little kids do, you dangle them and they laugh and giggle. Well, his little body recorded them together as one moment.
But they're not.
No, he believed that his dad hung him over the Grand Canyon. Until a moment in time in an NLP session where it was a timeline session where he was able to see the truth of the incident. The self, the other, and the observer was what was used in this particular session. And he realized his body recorded them as one thing. The dad hanging him upside down over the Grand Canyon. It never happened. But his whole life until that moment, and I want to say he was in his 50s, he really believed his dad was that kind of a person who would try to murder him. And that was the rudder for his life until that moment. He could not see value in himself because obviously his dad had no value for him. He was going to drop him into the Grand Canyon. It was like playing Russian roulette with the Grand Canyon.
Isn't it amazing how we make it up? We make it up. And, congratulations to that guy for doing the work. But it's so hard to admit that we got it wrong, right? We were right about our trauma.
Yeah.
We were right. How many times have we just decided in a relationship, I'm hurt, and they're obviously hurting me on the bad person, and they're very intentional about hurting me. Yeah. And how many times have we done that? And underlying it is a feeling that is really pushing it to be true.
It's true. I remember that this person had a real difficulty with finances and success in life. It was like, if my dad doesn't value, how could anybody else value me, and how could I value myself? So his life was limited by this false story. It was not a true story at all, but he kept running up against it. It was like running into a brick wall. Every time he would try to do anything else, he couldn't get past the leash of that moment. And he had no idea that it wasn't true. The minute that we are able to see a new perspective is the minute our imagination can dream bigger than it did a minute before. So what spurred this conversation is I was thinking about something that we're wanting to create in our business. We're really building an institute. That's where we're headed. And where it's going to be and how it's going to be, is on my mind a lot. I'm manifesting. I'm dreaming it up. Well, I saw a place here locally, which is not where we want the place, but it had some pieces that we want. So it was really active in my mind recently. And then my mind started to go to all the limitations. Well, we don't have this piece yet. We don't have that piece yet. And I'm not sure how it could be. And we have a practice of always challenging our limitations because we know for sure that they're usually tied to some story from our past that is likely not true. It doesn't mean that all traumas are not true, but usually the perspective is not as accurate as we think. And in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, there is so much more available with that. I couldn't even think about all these other possibilities just 5 seconds before. I had run up against my own brick wall, my own limitation on what that could be like. And then that's removed. And now there's a whole world of things that I can imagine about that place. It's kind of like we found a castle in Sicily that I wanted. And when I realized it had a church and a dungeon, I realized I could probably never live without a church and dungeon again. You know, that thing.
That is hysterical. Can't live without a church and a dungeon.
Right, but my imagination was greatly expanded.
Oh, that's so funny.
In both cases.
That's great. Well, you know, I tell you, this phenomenon, it presents itself every day. You know, I happened to be on the phone with a client who was an actor, and this actor was like, you know, the parts and stuff I get, and, you know, they're actor comedian, and they were like, gosh, you know, I don't seem to be able to break through. I got all the skills. I got, you know, I'm good at my craft, but I just can't seem to get through to that next level. And so we ended up working a cognitive movement session and just, hey, you know, let's just let yourself feel that I can't get through that next level. And all kinds of things came up during that, which from his nervous system, from his mind that came to the surface. The subconscious came to the surface, and he was able to, well, gosh, if I'm successful like this, then, you know, my wife may leave me. Like, I mean, you know, it's a false belief, but there was something stuck there that was the fear of a child, you know, something in the past from what he had experienced in the past from his parents, that fear just existed. And there were many, many, many others, but one after the next. And at the end of the session, the question was, can you see now why you would never want to become successful? Because you would lose the one you love? Does that make sense now? Why you wouldn't make the jump? So this is that quantum collapse, you know, that into this reality. But anyway, I got to tell you, this is really funny because one of the many things that came up was as a comedian, right? You have kind of a library of your possible content, and you know, and he went from, listen, I'm going to run out of content. I don't have content. And, you know, I've only got these, you know, little couple jokes here that I got. And after the session, you know, followed up a few months down the line, and he was like, oh my gosh, you know, the lid came off it all. Now I fully understand that I have unlimited content in reality. He was saying, you know, I literally could pick up a pair of glasses and have an entire hour on glasses. You know, he says, I can make up anything about anything, and I'll have a complete new set. So his ability, this exactly what Liz was saying, is the lid came off.
Yeah.
Right? The lid came off. Yeah. You release the trauma of your parents, and all of a sudden I have an unlimited comedy content.
Yeah. And it really happens with even just one. If a person can find even one limiting belief, that limiting belief is inevitably connected to something in their past. So we can call it a trauma. And I was joking about whether or not it's trash, but is it actually resourceful? Most of the time, no. So it's worthy of tossing it out. But if you can find the source of one limiting belief and clear that up, it can literally pop the lid off of what you can think about, what you can see for your future, how you can feel about your future. It can open up all of the ideas. And you have to be able to recognize where you're limited. Like me today, I realized my thoughts about the Institute were limited. You have to learn how to recognize that. That's number one. And then number two, you have to have a way to find in your body, in your nervous system, where that thing is lodged, and a way to remove it is the third thing. And that is something that Bill and I have available to everyone. We have a new program. It's called Our Essentials. It's replacing our basic training. But it teaches a person how to recognize the limitation through sensation, right? It teaches a person how to find it in their system, and then it automatically deletes it. It's like Control Alt Delete, but for your nervous system. And the effect is ginormous. Like ideas flow, new perspectives on what your life is really about show up. And life changes very, very rapidly. And I know it sounds simplistic, but it actually is. It's just a function of how we work and how our nervous system actually limits our thinking ability.
I got to tell everybody about this. Liz Larson, the famous philosopher, she had come up with something that I just absolutely, I talk about this is like, this will at some point, all those, Freud and everybody, this will be common knowledge at some point in the future and read about. And that is that there is something that she calls the core feeling. And there is, let's say, for example, a limitation in your life, some way that just kind of really feels like you. It feels very comfortable. Well, it just feels natural for you. There's a place in your body or a couple places where maybe it's frustration, maybe it's anger, maybe it's worry, maybe it's fear, maybe it's upset. Maybe it's a downtrodden feeling, despair, apathy, but it has a location in your body. And this feeling is what Liz is talking about eliminating. If you literally didn't have the feeling that you have, then all of a sudden you have new thoughts and new perceptions. And as ridiculous as it seems, this core feeling and its location in the body can be eradicated with cogno movement. You can literally focus on this feeling and do this exercise. It's a physical exercise, and voila, it moves out. You don't feel it. And naturally, without even trying, all of a sudden the new perceptions, kind of like we've been talking about for this entire program, come out. You have, by the way, a core positive or attracting feeling, and you also have a core limiting or repelling feeling.
And all of that will either expand or limit your imagination, which is where we started. So, Bill McKenna, we have run out of time for this episode. So people have to find out more about that the next time. If you'd like to see our faces, if you're listening on UK Health Radio, go to Cogno Movement on YouTube. Just spell out the word Cogno Movement, and there we are. You can see our faces. Or you can find us also anywhere that you like to find your podcasts. Just look up hashtag Wellbeing Podcast or the UK Health Radio Network, anywhere you like to find your podcasts. All right. Until next time, be safe and be well, and join us again for a great conversation again next week. Thanks, McKenna.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here with us on the New Life Perspective radio show. For more information or to find out more about the work that Bill and I do, please visit us at cognomovement.com or email us at info@cognomovement.com. See you again soon.